Allow me to introduce myself.
I am the last sane sports fan.
I am a genius by trade.
I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly.
Hello everyone and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. Well, I told you what we were going to talk about today, and we're going to focus on the NHL playoffs. As you can see, I've got my playoff beard going. Not quite full force, but hey, it's early yet, and hopefully we've got a long way to go in terms of a great playoff run, regardless of who you might be cheering for. Unless you're cheering for the Blackhawks, I can't necessarily condone that. Let's take a look at some of the opponents that are going to be facing each other starting tomorrow, which will be on Wednesday. A little bit of a preview going on. Let's start off with one of the interesting matchups, an all-Canadian matchup between Montreal and Ottawa. And a lot of people are going to sit there and say, well, why is this one an intriguing matchup at all? Because Montreal comes in with the hottest goaltender, but I shouldn't even say the hottest goaltender, but probably the best goaltender over the course of the season in Carey Price. He ended up finishing tops in the league in several statistical categories, including goals against, 1.96, save percentage, 0.933, wins, he ended up with 44. The only thing that he really wasn't in top form with was shutouts. Marc-Andre Fleury ended up with 10 there, but Carey Price had 9 for himself. So really you end up to kind of asking yourself, well, how does Ottawa have any kind of chance? Well, I'll answer that. They have a chance because they have the hottest goaltender in the league. They might not have the best goaltender in the league, but they definitely have the hottest in Hammond, the Hamburglar. He is a big reason why Ottawa is even in the playoffs right now. Ottawa ended up finishing in 7th place in their conference, but they had to go on an incredible run to get there. Ottawa was, I believe, at least 11 points out, if not 19. I don't know why the number 19 is stuck in my head. They won their final 3 games of the regular season. The Senators finished with 99 points, so final record of 43, 26, and 13. But they just had to go on a huge run. The last 10 games of the season, they finished 6-2-2. And again, Hammond was a big reason why all of that happened. So this one is an incredibly intriguing matchup due to the fact that you've got 2 of the hottest goaltenders in the league. You've got the hottest goaltender in the league, as I mentioned, versus the best goaltender over the course of 82 games. My heart wants to go with Ottawa here. Nothing against the Montreal Canadiens, but when you've got a hot goaltender, sometimes that can be the catalyst. But Ottawa scores 238 goals during the regular season. Montreal had 221, so they're not necessarily going to run away. It's going to be a fairly even matchup in terms of that, but again, I think this one's going to come down to goaltending, and I think Carey Price just has that extra little edge. Hammond may be the hotter goaltender, but I think Montreal squeaks out of this one. Probably going to go 6, maybe even 7 games. Should be a really interesting game, an interesting series. I think the Montreal Canadiens are going to come out on top of that one. Moving over now to another intriguing matchup. You've got the Washington Capitals. They're going to host the New York Islanders. And as you look at the standings to finish out the regular season, the Islanders kind of fell apart a little bit. They ended up tied with Washington. They ended up losing out due to various factors, tiebreakers and whatnot. But the Islanders were atop of the Eastern Conference for much of the year to start the year. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, that's because the Eastern Conference isn't as strong and they're not playing as many opponents. They don't have to do the traveling and all that. And all that's somewhat true. But the New York Islanders were just one of the top teams overall. I mean, they can score the puck. 252 goals during the regular season. Now, they do allow quite a few as well, 230. Washington only allowing 203, and they've scored 242. So this one is going to come down to the goaltenders in terms of trying to keep the puck out, because both these teams like to light the lamp. Ultimately, it's going to be a tight series, I think. But I think the New York Islanders are actually going to win, because I give them just a bit of an edge in goal. And this is a personal bias. I will put that out there. I'm a Yaroslav Halak fan. I was disappointed when the St. Louis Blues got rid of him, but I really do think that he could be the key in this series, taking nothing away from Braden Holtby. He's done an excellent job in net for Washington. In fact, he's third in the league in terms of wins with 41. But Yaroslav Halak had 6 shutouts on a team that wasn't all that great defensively. And a lot of that boils down to him. If he can cut out the mistakes, that is his biggest flaw, is he allows just odd goals that you're like, how in the world did that go in? If he can cut that out, if he can return to the form in the playoffs that he did with the Montreal Canadiens. He never got a chance with the St. Louis Blues. He never got a chance in the playoffs other than one game where he got injured against the San Jose Sharks. If he can return to the playoff form that we saw with Montreal a few years ago, I think he could be the key, and I'm going to pick the New York Islanders in that matchup. Next, starting on Wednesday, we've got the Chicago Blackhawks against the Nashville Predators. A lot of people are picking this one to be potentially the best playoff series. Going into this one, Nashville is going to have a home ice advantage, and that could be a huge factor for them. The Blackhawks don't care. The Blackhawks are 2-time Stanley Cup champions. Reports are that Patrick Kane is going to be available for game number 1. It's yet to be seen, obviously, what kind of impact he will have, but merely coming back and being available for this team, if he's even a shadow of the player that he can be, he could be a really important factor in how this one turns out. Both these teams, very physical. Chicago has that extra little bit of skill, but Nashville never fell off. Nashville kind of came out of nowhere this year with having Peter Laviolette as their coach. He did an excellent job of really turning that team around and keeping them motoring, because they're not necessarily going to wow you with any of their stats. Nashville ended up finishing the season scoring 232 goals, allowing 208. They've scored more actually than Chicago did, which is kind of surprising. But they went on a bit of a slide down the stretch. They were 4-4-2 in their last 10 and lost 3 in a row, which really allowed the St. Louis Blues to win the Central Division. But they still sustained a certain level for a certain amount of time in the regular season that makes them dangerous. I'm going to pick Chicago in this matchup, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as a lot of people might think if you just base it on the team names. On the one hand, you've got the Chicago Blackhawks, 2-time Stanley Cup champions. On the other hand, you've got the Nashville Predators, who are always a tough team to knock out, but they've never really done anything in their history in the course of the playoffs. They do have an excellent chance. I think this one could go between 5 and 7 games, but I ultimately think Chicago's skill is going to win out. They're going to be a tough test. Chicago, they went on a slide of their own. They lost 4 in a row to end the regular season, but if Patrick Kane gives them any kind of boost, they're going to be a dangerous team. Ultimately, I think the Chicago Blackhawks come out of that one. I'm going to say it's going to go 7 games, but I think Chicago comes out on top of that one. Last matchup that's going to start on Wednesday is going to be the Calgary Flames against the Vancouver Canucks, and I have to kind of smile at it's not really irony, but just the coincidental nature of the way the things have played out. There are 5 Canadian teams in the playoffs, the highest number in quite a long time. But 4 of them have to play each other. I mean, Canada can't catch a break. They get 5 teams in the first round. They're guaranteed to lose 2. But Calgary against Vancouver. Calgary ends up coming in. They lost one game, but they finished 6-3-1, exact same record over the last 10 games as Vancouver. The reason that I'm going to lean a little bit towards Calgary, because ultimately their overall stats kind of wash each other out. You look, Vancouver scored 242, allowed 222. Calgary scored 241, allowed 216. Slightly better defensively, but not much. As I said, their record in the last 10 is pretty much equal. Their home and away records pretty much kind of wash each other out. Those are only differing by a couple wins here or there. People are going to say that you should lean towards Vancouver, and I can't necessarily argue with that. I'm going mainly on a gut feeling. I think Calgary did enough down the stretch to really kind of prove themselves. They're a young team. They do have Jonas Hiller in net. I think that could be the key, because they have a definite guy that they're going to stand on, that they're going to lean on, and if he produces the way that he can, the way that he has in the past with Anaheim, if he can do that, I think Jonas Hiller could be the difference in this series, because Vancouver has kind of set themselves up for an odd situation. I haven't seen any official confirmation on like NHL Network or ESPN, but the word that I've heard around is that Eddie Lack is going to get the start, which is kind of interesting because they gave a fairly large contract to Ryan Miller, and before he got injured, he actually was having a fairly decent season. He ended up in the league leaders in terms of shutouts. He ended up tied with Yaroslav Halak with 6 shutouts on the year. So Ryan Miller is fully capable of winning you games, especially in the playoffs. He's proven it in the past. But he's at that stage in his career where you're not quite sure what you have in Ryan Miller, which almost makes it a little bit more understandable to go with Eddie Lack, because he's been hot as of late in terms of the way he's played, not necessarily in terms of wins and losses. But with Ryan Miller, you never know what you're going to get, because sometimes he's kind of a head case. If you get under his skin, then all of a sudden the goals start flowing in. But which Ryan Miller are you going to get? Are you going to get the one with Buffalo, where he could win you a series on his own? You could score 1 goal and all of a sudden he'll win you the game. Or are you going to get the Ryan Miller that you saw with the St. Louis Blues, where it was not his fault at all that the St. Louis Blues did not beat the Chicago Blackhawks last season, but he didn't do enough to win the series either. And that has been his MO. It's like sometimes he'll win you a series, sometimes he'll win you a game, other times he can just kind of drop into the background and let in the occasional soft goal. Again, I don't really have any hard facts, hard statistics to base this on, but I'm going to pick the Calgary Flames to come up with the victory there. That'll pretty much wrap it up for day number 1 of the NHL playoffs, our little preview here. We're going to look at the matchups. We're going to look at the matchups on Wednesday. Wednesday's show will cover Thursday's matchups, in case that's a little more clear. 4 more matchups to get to. It'll be Minnesota against St. Louis, Pittsburgh and the Rangers, Tampa Bay and Detroit, and Anaheim and Winnipeg. So a lot more hockey to get into there. That'll wrap it up for today's View from the Midwest. Hopefully you all hung in there. Comment, rate, and subscribe down there if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook, head over to the YouTube page. Give us a thumbs up, and we'll get this rolling for you. But until the next time, I'll see you then.
I remember